volunteers, informal carers, and professionals. Going to click that away on the topic of technology in rehabilitation. Afterwards, we'll have an intermediate phase, which is kind of typical of Living Lab research, to account for or to adjust maybe the protocol for the small-scale pilots if there are any interesting findings in the co-creation sessions that we need to take into account. And so that brings us to phase 2, the actual small-scale pilot testing, which for the timeline I think will be probably September or maybe spring or fall of next year, where we have 6 rehabilitation and/or data collection technologies tested in a rehabilitation context. And then finally, we will have phase 3, a harmonization phase, where we put all our experiences together and use the Delphi methods to come to a consensus on harmonization of protocol and procedures. Next slide, please. Yeah, there were some animations in there. You can just go through them. So this brings us to 6 small-scale pilots, which I will discuss in the next slide. So you can go to the next one, Despina. Thank you. So a first of the small-scale pilots is the assessment of or study of the short-arm human centrifuge to be used in rehabilitation from our partners from OUT. So you can see the centrifuge on the picture. Now, if you have any questions on it, I refer you to OUT. They will be able to help you better than I can. So they will assess the effects of this human centrifuge in stroke patients, but also it will be a controlled study. So they will compare it to healthy control participants and also to standard of care. The intervention, so the use of the centrifuge, will take 3 months with 3 sessions per week, 1 hour per session, and data will be collected at multiple time points from baseline to 12-month follow-up. Outcomes will be quite similar across the different small-scale pilots. Thank you, Despina. Can go to the next one. Following small-scale pilot is a collaboration between Gaia and Ocean Living Lab, and they will assess the effects of performing arts therapy, so music and dance in public spaces in both healthy adult men and women. It's again a controlled study. The intervention will last about 2 months, and it has a pre-post design, so data will be collected at baseline and at the end, and this with using both questionnaires and smart devices. So this is a more technology-supported data collection during rehabilitation than really using technology as part of the rehabilitation. Thank you. Next slide, please. Then in a third small-scale pilot, our colleagues at Intras will assess the effects of Gradi or Cognitive, a program to evaluate and train cognitive functions for older adults with mild cognitive impairments or dementia, and they will also assess the user experience of clinicians. So it's again a pre-post design, and the intervention will be used approximately 4 to 6 months, 2 sessions per week, 30 minutes per session, and the outcomes are again user experience, quality of life, well-being, cognitive functioning. So these are quite similar across the different pilots. Next slide, please. This one is the one that we're working on, so a collaboration between Likalab and Mobilab in Care. We will assess the effects of VR mirror therapy as compared to regular mirror therapy, and this in stroke patients. We will also assess the user experience of clinicians who will be involved in the study and collect data at 4 time points: at baseline, after a single session, before the last session, and after the last session. And again, outcomes will be user experience, quality of life, well-being, and some extra ones relevant to this study. Next slide, please. Then our partners in Canada will assess the effects of teledance, and teledance is, thank you. Teledance is an intervention meant for stroke patients, and they will use dance video vignettes delivered via the OpenTerra platform as part of their rehabilitation. Both patients, clinicians, and relatives will be included in the study, and data will mainly be collected at the end of the study. And again, measures of usability, acceptability, feasibility, user experience. And then the final small-scale pilots, also from our partners in Canada, they will assess the effects of augmented gait training, and they will augment gait training or improve or try to improve gait training by means of 3 technologies, so biomechanics, haptics, and virtual reality, and this also for stroke patients. It's a pre-post design, this study. So data were collected at baseline, but also after the intervention and the follow-up point. And outcomes, again, will be quality of life, well-being, user experience, and also some additional measures relevant for this study. So a lot of pilots that will use technology either for rehabilitation purposes itself or for data collection during rehabilitation. So looking forward to these results.
Thank you very much, Sylvie, for this exciting set of activities that you're coordinating. And going on in level 36, on the second transition activity of VITALISE, it's about transitional care. And transitional care decisions. Notable for the transnational feasibility study. And I don't know if you can hear me well. I hope so. The objectives of this study are to evaluate the harmonized infrastructure for collecting digital biomarkers that will inform decisions.
Sorry to point out, but we
cannot hear you.
Well. No, we don't hear you yet. Maybe because you're muted?
Is it any better now? Or no? No.
At the beginning, yes. Later, it goes.
Now? Is it better now?
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, sorry about that, apologies. So I was saying that the objectives of our study in transitional care is to test and evaluate the harmonized infrastructures for collecting these digital biomarkers from technology about transitional care, but is mainly to evaluate the feasibility of implementing all these ICT tools in clinical care, and maybe do an estimation of initial patterns of this data collected and how they can inform transitions, as we are not going for large-scale pilots. And we have already done a publication, as in Work Package 5 as well, in the MIR research protocols, and the preprint is already available and accepted. The implementation phases are more or less following the structure of Work Package 5 as well. So we have a co-creation phase that will go on first, and we may rerun if we need additional information to be gathered. We have the testing and simulation phase that will test without real patients these data collections that we want to use, and also the transnational pilot that is the actual pilot. And we hope that all this data will give the input to big data collection. So in the co-creation, we want to evaluate things like what are the most important information that healthcare professionals need, what are the most important information that the patients need when they are hospitalized and moving to another care center. Explore their experiences, the experience of the patients, the healthcare professionals, but also the family, and also how we can capture this and capture other data, but not stealing time from healthcare professionals and the patients. So in the more unobtrusive way as possible. And moving on, the testing and simulation phase will run in Laurea Simulated Hospital with nursing students that will undergo undertake the role of patient, but also healthcare professional, and will test all this data capturing and also the information with questionnaires, prompts, prems, and other input that will be gathered during the simulated hospitalization. And then the transnational pilot, which will run in Thessaloniki, Spain, and also Canada, Montreal. The phases that will be followed is the recruitment of the participants when they are inside the hospital, the evaluation by a clinician, but also the information provided by the patient himself. The data gathered digitally for the digital biomarkers during the hospitalization inside the living labs in the transitional care, but also some follow-ups that will be done when the person is transitioning to another care setting, but also follow-ups after 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months following the discharge. And the outcomes that we envisage to have are to assess all this feasibility of collecting this type of data in real life clinical environments, but also to explore initial patterns in the data that will be gathered. As we said, this is not a large scale pilot, so the small numbers of people do not allow us to have any statistical important information. So this is it for work packet 6, and I will give the floor to Tem.
Okay, so pretty much the process is following the same steps as everybody else, but in here we are trying to co-creating a harmonized living lab for big data-driven hybrid personal development, and hybrid personal meaning that you are using also the kind of the big data approaches to collect the data, not only asking from the persons. And it's aimed for protocol for co-creating, testing, and seeking the consensus between the players. Okay, please, next one. So, like I said, the main goal, like in whole VITALISE project, is to co-create and test this harmonized research protocol for developing something, and in our case, is to developing the hybrid personas, which are the kind of hypothetical user archetypes based on who is representing the user community. And also the other important thing for us is that we want to investigate how to utilize and how applicable the kind of new innovative technologies are when we are collecting data from the different types of an everyday living environments, and as well as different living lab environments. And also for this BP7, we have the preprint is available in this link, so you could be reading that if you want. Next one. So the first phase, which is kind of grounding on the understanding that what are the most potential data collection approaches and research approaches for collecting the data. And in a way that the first understanding that this is the tool set and these are the kind of the approaches that what we could be using. And for that, we've been collecting the data from the VITALISE living labs who are participating in these things. And today, later on, we will be discussing about that, what kind of results we will be having on the standardization process. And how we did it is basically the different types of online co-creation workshops, as well as the kind of an iterative co-writing in order to get in this publication. Please, next one. Then the actual thing, what we do as a case studies, we will have 5 small case studies who are testing these different protocols in the different settings. And the idea is in here is to kind of utilize the data triangulation using different data sources, investigator triangulation using different investigators in different countries, theory triangulation using different theoretical approaches to understand the phenomenon, and as well as different methodological approaches, and collecting both quantitative and qualitative data. And the idea is that these 5 case studies will be generating big data, quantitative big data, while they are doing these case interventions by using different sensors or mobile phone applications. And the next one. And for our case studies, our first one is this kind of a combination on distributed living lab facility. So basically participants' homes, as well as virtual reality environments where you use mobile phone for coaching. They will have a week's training period, which helps to the person to maintain the social relationships and activities that could be risky when they are going to the withdraw from the working life. And the interaction type over there is virtual coaching by the mobile phone. The second case study is a single-sided living lab facility. It's a smart home living lab environment equipped with the virtual reality environments, basically window-based software. And they will be doing a series of cognitive and physical exercises as well as the yoga exercises. And then using different approaches, banking game, virtual supermarket game, they are kind of measuring the different capacities and cognitive status of the persons. And as well as at the same time, the sensor technologies such as wristband sensors are using an EEG, are used to collect this kind of technological based big data. Case study 3 is also a single-sided living lab facility. It's a measurement laboratory, which also have different kinds of virtual reality environments. 2 weekly sessions, 30 minutes during the 8-week training period, which is focusing on physical and cognitive training. And they will be using the motion capture via kinetic. The case study 4 is a bit different. It's distributed facilities in the sports halls, nursing homes, outdoor training facilities, as well as using wearable sensors. It's the aim is to kind of develop comprehensive physical fitness evaluation, a protocol where you can go, that all the adults will be going on a different measurement points, and after that we will understand what is the physical fitness level in comprehensive way. And then later on in Spain and Hungary, they will be playing football, and in Hungary in fitness training about 8 weeks and having the pre and post measurements for that, and also using the sensors. And the last one is the also distributed facilities in museums where the people are wearing different wearables and trackers. They go to museum, explore the museum environment while using these innovative technologies as part of them. So that's pretty much the cases, and the final phase is that kind of a cross case study. So we try to understand throughout these 5 cases that what are the key challenges and critical success factors for developing this kind of big data-driven personas, data collection. And for that, we will be using semi-structured interviews as well as a series of workshops to understand that what is actually working. Okay, I think that was the overall outcome in here is, of course, each of the case studies have the overall outcome regarding to for example, are the training programs effective or not, but as a general aim, like in all the VITALISE VBs is the develop the kind of the harmonized processes for these research activities. And hope is that we will be speed up and improve the research quality and offer novel possibilities to open data share in multidisciplinary research, as well as being able to compare the study results between the different countries. So that's pretty much what we are doing in VP7.
So thank you all for presenting these joint research activities. Let's hope that we will have some amazing collaboration, for which I am sure, and also some interesting results at the end. And now, in order to close the joint research activities sessions, we would like to give the floor to UPM and Bea and Gloria in order to briefly present us an idea that they have about task 6.2 actually that they are leading, but can be also applied to other the other 3 joint research activities implementation.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you see my screen and hear me? Okay, thanks. First of all, thanks to the coordination of VITALISE for inviting us to present here our experience in piloting in different type of European projects. For instance, we have participated in 2 flagship projects involving between all of them more than 50,000 users. So we are happy to be able to share with you this experience. The projects are Activate, which involve in the preliminary phases of the pilots, the living labs for the co-creation sessions, and also for the part of the pre-testing with real users before deploying the technologies in real settings. So based on this experience, today we want to give you a very short insights on the pilot design and the process. The first question to be answered is, what do we want to demonstrate with the pilots? A part of the protocols that have been presented there, do we want anything else with the pilots, or just we want to demonstrate the questions presented in the work packages 5, 6, and 7? So having said this, we want to share with you our phases, the phases we use to organize and define the pilots. These are the preparation phase, the deployment phase, and the running phase, and the impact assessment. The preparation phase, for us at least, includes all the ethical and legal aspects, and also the study protocol definition, which are the basis for defining a pilot. Then in the deployment phase, there are 3 activities that are key to really have a successful piloting: execution, which are the recruitment, in which you can define the recruitment strategy, inclusion, exclusion criteria, and so on, the training, and the installations. For the running phase, we envisage the whole pilot execution, the control of users in operation, dropouts, and so on, and also the definition of key performance indicators for monitoring pilots. And the last phase, it's the most important, which includes all the previous phases, and it's devoted to the evaluation, data analysis, and the aim is to generate the pilot results, the global pilot results. In VITALISE project, these phases match pretty well with the task of the work packages. So now, focusing on the pilots monitoring, it seems that it could be only related to the running phase because it's pilots monitoring. However, from our experience, we know that this phase should be to the global pilot execution. So all the phases, all the tasks in these work packages. And to finalize, we were asked to think in tools for monitoring pilots, but for monitoring pilots, it's necessary to start working in the definition, indicators definition. Are we going to define these indicators for monitoring in a common way for all the joint research activities, or they will be specific, or we are going to have some hybrid mode in which we can define common indicators and some specific? It's something that we need to start discussing. And also we think that this phases definition help us to better organize these pilots monitoring. The next step is how are we going to collect this data that we are defining? From our experience, there are two very easy and common tools that are pretty well for doing that, which is an online Excel file updated periodically. For instance, we can set up that every 2 weeks or every month, all the living labs or all the pilots should complete this Excel file or a Google form that could be transformed in an Excel file. And other tools can appear for doing that. And the last step is how we visualize this collected data. And here we want to propose different approach. The first one can be a PowerPoint, a very simple tool that is fed with the Excel files. But we can do a more, we can go a step forward. We could visualize this information in the VITALISE web page, because we are, as Dokimos mentioned, we are as open as we can. And we think that it could be a good approach. And also we would like to mention that we use the Power BI Microsoft tool also for monitoring the large scale pilots. And it's a not too difficult tool, and it offers very good features and functionalities that can be useful to present the current status piloting pilot phase, let's say. But apart of that, how to monitor or control the pilot activities. To do that, apart of defining the monitoring tools, it's important that we set up a pilot plan at the beginning. Then we will have the continuous evaluation process, and then we can check if the results are as we expect. So following this iterative approach, the results can be successful. And that's all from our side. Thank you very much for listening us.
Thank you very much, Gloria. And we can take 5 minutes from the next session to discuss any questions or comments for the joint research activities or for the monitoring of research activities, if there are any comments or questions. Okay, if not, there were 2 questions in the chat. Actually, for the slides and the contact details, the slides are already in Teams for the consortium, but we can share it in our website after that as well, along with the contact details, of course. So, let's move on. We are very, very happy that we are now starting the first harmonization body meeting today in this plenary meeting. So I will share again my screen to give you an overview of what we will do for this next 1 hour. The idea of this meeting is to gather the VITALISE consortium, of course, but all the people outside the consortium that are interested in designing together with us this harmonization methodology and harmonization outcomes for living labs. So designing what we call the living lab standards, let's say. And today we will present you the harmonization methodology as has been structured by the VITALISE consortium in the first standard version that we have. This methodology will be continuously improved, and we hope that it will inspire later on other groups of living labs to define harmonization procedures, because VITALISE is dealing with health domain living labs, but there are a lot of other domains. We will present the conceptual overview of these standards and of the living lab management system that we envisage. And also we want to launch the wiki page for living lab harmonization, and then discuss together some real-time testing and the structure that we are proposing for these services. So I will give the floor to my colleague Celia in order to present the harmonization methodology, and then we can continue the discussion.
Yes, thank you, Despina. I will share my screen. Can you see it? Perfect. Okay, hello everyone, I'm Celia from Mouth. We were thinking of starting this harmonization body meeting by presenting briefly and discussing about the VITALISE harmonization process and the several steps that will be followed during this dynamic procedure. So to begin with, the VITALISE proposed methodology for harmonization is based on a modified version of the PDCA-PDSA methodology, which is about planning, doing, checking, or planning, doing, studying, and acting, combined with principles and ideas from the Agile development cycle. So as you can see here, at this schematic depiction of the methodology steps, the first phase before entering the cycle is about the state of the art. The second is the co-creation. The third one is the consensus. The fourth, the approval process, and then follows the implementation in the phase of revision and adjustments. We can start seeing them briefly one by one. During the first phase, the state of the art, which is depicted with the first linear, practically is the one performed in task 2.1, and it consists of 3 sub-steps: the common database that was created, the harmonization body meeting, and the interviews which were conducted with each one of the living labs. So we could say that this is the phase for identifying the initial status, and for that reason, all living labs participated in data collection by providing information about their tools, their services, methods, use cases, etc., along with their interpretation. This led to the creation of an initial common database, which was then discussed and analyzed during the first harmonization body meeting, and afterwards during the interviews with each one of the living labs. The second step is the co-creation process, the aim of which was to initially conduct a study and a qualitative analysis of all the information provided by the living labs, as we have already done so far, in order to obtain, of course, an understanding about the current status and the performance in general. And then in the next iteration, the goal is to explore and identify new procedures that have not been mapped before and do not appear in any of the previous standard versions, and also in order to identify changes on the existing standard versions that will increase the KPIs. The outcome of this step at the next iterations will be an updated living lab services, procedure and methods list, along with the additions of unmapped items. The third step is about the consensus process, which aims to result in an agreement over the harmonization process among the members of the body, but also among the members of the board. So as an input here at this phase, we take the description and the template that have occurred from the co-creation, and afterwards, during next iterations, we take the descriptions and the information that have come out from the previous revise and adjust phase. And for that reason, here we begin with identifying and discussing conflicts so that we can then come to consensus. And here the outcome, as we envisage it right now, will be the level of agreement for all the updated procedures and services that we have gone through the implementation phase, or those that emerged later from the co-creation phase. Proceeding, we have the fourth step, the approval process. Here, the objective is to approve and publish the current version of the standard that came out of the consensus process after going through a public review for the final comments. So these three key points, public review, approve, and publish, are the implementation steps. And the input here are the items with the supermajority consensus from the previous phase, or maybe less if the harmonization body or board agrees to do so. At the end, the outcome of this process is expected to be the updated version for the current iteration. The next step is the implementation of the JRAs, the joint research activities, from all the living labs that are involved. Here, living labs are invited to adopt the current approved and published standard, focusing more, if it's possible, on the new services and modifications that were introduced at the current standard. So the input we have here is this approved and published standard, and the three implementation steps are: 1, the planning; 2, a period for implementation; and 3, the KPIs and feedback collection from the living labs. As an outcome of this process, we will have the feedback and the information collected from the living labs after the implementation of the JRAs. Lastly, we have the revise and adjust step, during which we aim to reflect on this feedback, the feedback collected during the previous phase, for each one of the existing, but also the new services and the procedures that will be possibly added later on. And also to propose the appropriate adjustments that would lead to better KPIs. Consequently, the input here will be the information provided by the living labs through documents, maybe, and lists that the living labs will complete regarding the number and description of the existing services, tools, processes, as well as the KPIs from the implementation phase. That way, after this step, the expected outcome is a report with proposed updates for the living lab services, processes, and methods. And here, to sum up, we see that the methodology of the VITALISE harmonization process is an iterative and dynamic procedure that constantly evolves. And now the main idea about the next standard versions is that they will be changed and improved over time during each cycle that we run through every time. So our objective right now is to explore and identify any new possible service or procedure that has not been mapped or documented before in the previous standard version. And also the other goal is to identify changes or make adjustments on the existing standard version that will increase the KPIs. The iteration that will follow will take place every 6 months, attempting to harmonize procedures and services among all the living labs. And after each iteration, the outcome will be the deliverable of the standard version. So I think that's all for me. Thank you very much. We expect your feedback, any comments that you may have for that process, harmonization process.
Celia, can you go back to the figure, the circle? Yes, here. Thank you. So we expect ideas, comments, changes. Is there anything that might not be clear to you? Or, for example, for me, not every step is clear yet. Okay, I see that we are not up for discussion maybe right now, or we all agree that this is the perfect methodology, but let's see in practice. In any case, if you don't have any comments, let's go, let's continue. Okay, I see a comment. It would be nice to see a potential timeline to all these steps. So, Celia, do you want to answer or should I go?
Yes, it's a schema as we envisage it right now. We propose it and we see how it works. We are open to changes. Maybe some things will not function and then we can adjust and then see them how it works again. It's just an initial overview.
And this schema, this actual circle, will is supposed to be repeated every 6 months. So every 6 months we have a deliverable that is the next standard version. And in order to come to this, we envisage to go through all these steps. So every 6 months. So imagine each step that will last about 1 month, let's say.
All the steps of the circle and not from the linear process in the beginning.
Yes. Okay, so no other questions. So back to this screen, and now I will give the floor to Temu to give you an overview of the conceptual living lab management system that we envisage, and of course we would like also your views on that.
Yes, let's jump on this one. So we have been using these numberings in here, and I will call each of those explaining what they are, and especially we are interested in that are we missing some big blocks in here? So that would be very useful for us in a way that if we can identify something that is missing from the overall framework. So when we started this work, is one of the items was already challenging about the terms and the definitions, and everybody who is doing any research is, for us researchers, is very difficult to agree about the certain definitions, and that's why we were thinking about that one of the key items in the standard should be like a living lab lexicon where we provide definitions for certain terms. So later on it would be much easier then to discuss with each other, or at least we will have a kind of common ground to refer. We don't have to be always agreeing on the definition, but we will have a common ground to agree about the certain things. So for example, when I'm talking about what is a workshop, then we will have a common understanding. That might be quite easy to do, but let's say what is a prototype, then it becomes already a much more difficult. But the aim is to have a bunch of terms and definitions. So you could be using that when you are collaborating with somebody else and kind of can get more fast and straight into actual business instead of arguing about that what is the term. The second one is on the right up over there is the living lab business model. So idea for that section is basically based on the product validation in health projects, where we kind of identified about was like 101 different attributes for the living lab business model. So it's basically based on the business model canvas, and under each canvas key item we will have a different attributes, and depending on is that attribute important for living lab or not. So, and the idea in here is, of course, now we have mainly data from the health and well-being living labs, because that was also kind of updated while we were doing the first kind of a state-of-the-art evaluation. But if you think about living lab standard, which is covering all the different fields of the living labs, so we are definitely missing the business model attributes from those different disciplines. Like, for example, if living lab is focusing on the circular economy items, their partnerships are totally different, probably comparing to the somebody who is working in the healthcare sector. The idea is to have a comprehensive list of the attributes And in a way, then we could be quantifying the Living Lab business models throughout the attributes. So that would be giving a better idea that which of the Living Labs are similar or different or whatever. It would be helping you to identify that, okay, those Living Labs will have those, let's say, those partners or those channels or those customers. And if you don't have that, it might be helpful for you to use also as a tool to kind of develop your own business model. The next item is the research process. It's basically a scientific research process, like how we do it. And for that, we've been using as a founding information is the research process that has been defined as a part of the VITALISE proposal for the European Commission. And that's why that is also the one thing that pretty much follows the stuff that what we were kind of explaining as a part of these JRA descriptions, that you have to do your planning and recruiting and so forth. And the idea is here is that we have this research process, but on the other hand is that we have an innovation process, the number 4 on the right hand side. So we have to have the kind of an interlinkage between the innovation process and research process. And depending on what kind of an, the innovation item the Living Lab research is trying to develop, like, are you doing the only, like, for example, doing a concept, your project is focusing on the conceptual development, or are you running small scale or large scale experiments? So definitely the research process is a bit different, or at least will have a different items comparing to what innovation process phases you are planning to cover. And that's why it's important for us to try to somehow get linkage, or maybe in the future have like proven templates that if you are in this phase, you follow this process, that should lead to good results. And the clue between the research process and innovation processes is the Living Lab R&D services. So what kind of services they are offering for the customers or whoever they are doing the Living Lab work. And in here we have been a bit trouble in that sense that what is a service, what is a method, and so forth. And it's not always kind of a clear cut in that sense. What is difference between service and methods or tool? So is it a workshop? Is it a service, or is it a method? So of course, depending on what you do, it might be both. But anyway, the idea between the R&D services is that you will have this kind of, let's say, service packages, and you will be understanding that if I'm a researcher or I'm a company or whoever, and I want to be collaborating with you, I will understand that what you can be offering for me. And in general, on the top, if we have the Living Lab research infrastructure, it's basically combining everything together. And like in the VP7, I was explaining that, you have single site research facilities, like, let's say, smart home lab or Living Lab laboratory. You have distributed research infrastructure, which could be like, for example, a street in a city, or the person's homes. Then you have virtual research infrastructures, and then you have mobile research infrastructures, which you can be bringing in anywhere. So basically, this whole thing is that we will be introducing that there are different types of research infrastructures for Living Labs, and you are explaining your infrastructure throughout all of these other items. And then on the 7th is the data collection approaches, which are divided in the three different sectors. So we have the methods and tools, and the method could be like survey, focus group, interview, and so forth. And then we have devices and technologies. So like in our case, the VP7, we'll be using like sensors or wristbands or eye tracking or whatever. So idea is also that we will be listing what kind of technologies and devices besides the methods and tools the Living Labs are using. So you could be using that also once again as a foundation to understand that, okay, what kind of possibilities I have for the data collection, and hopefully in the future we will have the tight community who are using the similar devices, and they share their knowledge about those and develop the research protocols for using for those particular approaches. And then the final one is the validated questionnaires and instruments. In here we are referring to like, for example, if you're measuring a PROMS or PREMS, there are a bunch of, the questionnaires and scientific instruments which has been validated for example, for quality of life. There are different tools for measuring quality of life. And then maybe in the future, we might have some certain suggestions that in the certain settings, okay, we see that these are the instruments that you could be using for collecting the data. And the bonus in here is, of course, in the way that if we are using a similar questionnaires and data collection instruments, we have a possibility to compare results between the different studies. Let's say you are trying to measure the impact of the certain device or certain protocol impact on the health. And if we have like a bunch of different test results already, so we could be saying that, okay, on the average, you are below the 20% or 80% or whatever. That would be very valuable information for the who is developing the solutions. So basically, this is the general framework that we ended up, and also this is kind of the results of the iteration of all the partners in here, and this is what we ended up as defining the main clusters. And I really like to now open the discussion about that. Are we missing some big blocks in here? And as well as, within each of the individual blocks in here, we really would like to hear about your insights, that what should be there, what is important, and in general, do you see this as a sense-making framework for you? Does it to help you to understand what is the Living Lab operations that you need to be doing? But please, the floor is yours.
Teemu, I just wanted to add something, because you were speaking about the business model canvas also, huh? And what I would suggest is before you start with the business model canvas is to do a value creation canvas first, because that kind of loads the business model differently. So what I have seen in workshops I did with business modeling, and I also use Lauria's business modeling document here also for, is also that when you do the value creation modeling first, that helps, especially with new values captured in this process, and then do the business modeling, because then you can be more specific for the actual value proposition you have with VITALISE. So maybe that's an idea.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that one, because when we were doing this this business model canvas stuff for Prova Health, we actually used 4 different business model canvases over there, but we ended up then using we collected data throughout the different, but we didn't, I don't remember if we used that one. But the weakest part of this attributes that we've been defining for those 101 was definitely the value proposition, and that is something that we really need to be the sharpening. What is the value proposition that the Living Lab could be offering for the customers or for the research in general? And that is something that is you really need to focus on.
Yeah, and I think it's different per pillar. So you have the pillars like your research, R&D, and innovation, and the value proposition can be quite different for it, and also the values captured or the values destroyed could be different.
Yeah. And for example, in now this in VITALISE, we have already been identified a bunch of different potential researchers kind of groups that could be using our infrastructure. And one more important thing is that yes, in the product validation health project originally that was focusing on the SMEs. The customer for that wasn't the researcher. So that's why it's very good that we have this VITALISE project, because now we could be looking this from the researcher's point of view. So if they are our customers, so how we do that. But I think that easiest way would be do that then is the using those user personas or potential, the roles that we've been defining, and then let's use the canvas that you were value canvas that you were saying. So I think we could end up in a really good results in that sense.
Yeah, and what I also when you kind of work it out in proto persona, then you could also do like groups within the, let's say, the open stand-up meetings in VITALISE, then use these proto personas to further develop with the group to make it even more specific, so the services would be linked to it more closely. Yeah,
and we've been discussing previously that we hope that at least the VITALISE partners will be engaging to those roles throughout their own networks when we test out our things, so we get like international data about the how do our services and offerings are seeing for them.
Yeah, nice. Okay, thank you.
Mr. B. Selm, I don't know your first name, my apologies.
Hi, yes, I'm Bror. I strongly agree with the previous remark, because again, in the spirit of Living Labs, we are always speaking about the shared common value between all the quadruple helix players. And thus, if we go to any of the, you could say, traditional business model canvases or business model approaches, we are missing the co-element, shared element of all the four. So again, I really would highlight here the shared value canvas instead of the traditional business model canvas approach. We really need to look at more carefully on how value is created to all of the players in the Living Lab environment.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. So that's something definitely that we need to do, and we just have to put that on the timeline. Maybe but I don't think that today we are planning deciding that when we do it, but that's definitely on the map. And maybe if we are hurried, we can get that results on the next iteration. If not, definitely for the third one.
Well, my comment is really that it's a fundamental thing. It is something which is determining the character of the whole project, and that's why it's not just something which you can leave on a later stage or I would say just dilute. It's in the core. If you are looking at the Living Labs methodology as such, and that is what I know you have experience about, but really dig deeper into that than you are now doing here now. That's my rather strong personal opinion.
Yeah. Anybody else commenting? The more critics we get, so better we will come. So please be hard on us.
There are some comments in the chat. I don't know if people want to speak or if I go and read them.
Yeah, so what I wrote in the chat is that at the Eindhoven University, we have done indeed some work on alternatives to the classical canvas, which are more service-oriented and co-creation oriented. The work that I've shared in the chat is based on workshops with various industrial partners from multiple domains, but for example, from the mobility domain. And I happily bring you in touch with the principal investigators of such projects, because indeed those, let's say, frameworks can also be applied then in the more societally oriented projects that we happen to be in the health setting.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to reading the research that you propose. So, and gladly to invite you to join our work.
Great.
Anybody else besides the business model things, like a lot of challenges in the research and innovation process, as well as the how we combine the services for us?
Well, perhaps from my side then again, so about the business model stuff, I think I was then rather theoretical, but my other comment in the chat was very pragmatic in a way. I think about the data collection approaches, we have some very clear low-hanging fruit. I think we primarily need to bring people in touch with one another there, because I think ultimately it's about finding each other. And so for me, that is then the priority, to get in touch with those who are, for example, working with these wearables that were mentioned. And I'm fully trusting that when the information becomes public on the website, that also others could join such collaborative efforts. And I think indeed, really listing clearly in a very accessible way who's working on what is low-hanging fruit that can progress us there.
Yeah, so we have this kind of a matrix structure. We don't have the slide in here, but the idea is that whatever item you have in here, let's say that we are describing a workshop. So we could be entering that, who has been using that particular methods in what kind of user groups, which technologies has been using. So you will have the structure is actually also kind of in the social network within these studies. And because we are also collecting this kind of an open data, you could have not only the research results, but if the project has been providing the open data, you will also have possibility to access the data. So that is the kind of the big vision in here, that everything is interlinked in that sense. And I will have an access to directly to that person who has been doing on that work. So you don't have to anymore basically then access to the one address, but really that creating a serious community between the researchers who are doing this, because we know that there's always a lot of challenges, especially when we implement something new, like some new devices is coming or some new research approach is coming. That's the time that when we need the help from the other researchers to do that. And hopefully we can engage this kind of a collaboration throughout this standard, and then as well as kind of speed up the process, because we don't have to start by discussing about basic definitions, but we can actually jump on the actual work. But maybe Despina, maybe we could be adding on this slide set the matrix stuff in the for if people are downloading, that might give a bit idea about what we are looking for.
And I will also continue a bit as we were talking about tools and all this being depicted somehow and included in a single accessible and easy to use tool. For the time being, we would like to introduce you the wiki of Living Labs harmonization that we are launching today. I will give you a quick overview of the wiki. You have already the link in the chat that you can join and see. I will go through very quickly and then I will give the floor to you for comments and ideas as well. So is a normal wiki page as is we are used to. Here is the home, and it has some welcome and objectives of this wiki. Some important tips and tricks of how to use is that it has this very nice feature that if you, for example, go somewhere and you collect a text and you click Ctrl+M in your keyboard, you can directly start typing something. So like, for example, I don't like this word that you're using here, or I don't think that this is something that it works. So you can add the annotation and continue reading. And also you can add comments here. So going back, and if you want to show or hide the comments, you can click Alt+A. And also you can register. And then if you register, you have your username and your password, and you can write comments with that so that we know who you are and what you're representing. Or if you don't want, you can add comments without leaving your name. And here you can see the structure that Teemu was talking about. So we have, of course, an introduction that describes in details all of this, what is each step of the conceptual model. And then each step is the Living Lab business model with what has been developed so far. So it's not a final complete version as such, but is an initial version. So for example, in the research process, there is no input yet, but we are planning to include so in the innovation process as well. And then we go to the R&D services, which is the most complete session, but not final. It just has a lot of input. And also research infrastructure, data collection devices and technologies. So the floor is yours for comments, for discussions, but you can also go through the wiki and start playing if you like. We expected at the beginning general comments of the wiki. How does it look like? Does it sound like a good idea, a bad idea? And then we will go one by one in the R&D services to discuss some examples together.
I was wondering, is there like a common approach? Is it just like open feedback for the text, or does it need like certain elements or a certain length, or like, yeah, there's no that could be good, like to have some guidelines on the section for it to be even, or will you do the final editing? Yeah, okay, that's the approach. Yeah.
At the beginning, the idea, at least what we have in mind, but we are open to new suggestions, was to be completely open so everyone can join and write a comment. Of course, this has risks that you might start writing things that are not.
I've done these things for education also, and what helped is that that you would have like some guidelines. For instance, some people put links in, and at the very end there are double links, for instance. Or some people would have like definitions. Other would, so main definitions like well, Living Lab is obvious, but in some cases multiple terms were used. So yeah, that could render more editing work. So maybe we could think about a bit some consensus on like basic things that will help the writing. And then I think some things here are also linked to work packages. So this is also, I think, good that the work package if there's a work package meeting, that they would take it up as an agenda just to have a look at it. And let's say, let's work for 10 minutes on this section together. And then you will have more results, I think.
Yeah, coming back to the terms. So basically, I think it should be working in a way that, because we will have in here the lexicon, the definition for certain terms. And then we try to agree on, let's say, workshop is a workshop, and that's me. And whenever we are referring that type of thing, we should be using that. But also we could have like an alternative terms, which we know that people are using, but in most cases, Wiki is working in a way that it says that, okay, go to this and that page to see the, you know, the conflicts in here. And in general, might be also kind of a good idea in here that what are the conflicts in here, or do we have like a big conflict? So we might have to discuss about that, how we are managing that. If we have a bunch of different comments in here, that how we deal with that, or do we have like a editorial work where we say that for this we will have conflict on this topic at the moment, and please, we need your help to sort it out, this conflict. But like you said, we are just planning to how we are actually going to be operating.
Yeah, and I think it could be like a really interesting learning curve, as you say, because these conflicts are things that are unclear in a consortium maybe, or it could really give a spin-off to further definition or sharpening our ideas.
Temu and Despina, may I ask something? I'm Sofia Senguli from CERF. So if I understood well, this wiki page is open to modifications, or if we have any suggestion, we have to refer it at you first.
No, it's, yeah, we just have a discussion this morning about that. We would like to start in a way that is fully open for anybody to do anything. And if we end up in trouble later on having content that is like somebody trying to destroy things or whatever, then we have to be refiguring out. But the idea really was at the first stage that fully following the principles of the VITALISE project as open as possible. And in here, the idea was really that anybody can do, you know, anything in here.
Yes, because I know that I believe that being open means that it provides creativeness. But I agree with Daniele that editing should have some limitations. We could not add anything without permission. I don't know.
If I can comment on this, actually, Sophia, it's open for suggestions or annotations. And then the idea is that we collect all the annotations, the suggestions, and we, as you said, it cannot be completely open because then it might be a mess. So
actually, I'm not asking. I'm saying my opinion.
No,
okay.
you are right. You're right, and we have the same. Actually, it's open for everyone to read, for everyone to annotate, to comment, but not to change. So every 6 months, the harmonization body and the board will collect everything, will analyze, will decide what makes sense, actually what has been annotated many times, and then we will edit this.
And the last question from me. Is these modifications concern only the depth of details or also the structure? I mean, the menu and the left side of the page, because I think that most of us could propose other ordering.
You mean the order or the new items?
Yes, exactly. And also maybe editing of the existing ones.
Yeah. So that's the main point that like Iva Dokimas was saying, that we're collecting the inputs, and then following the procedures that the acceptance and the cycle procedure, and then redo the text based on the what we have. So we already did a bit of that in the state of the art phase, but not too much about. But some minor things were changed because some titles were not fitting for everybody, and we tried to figure it out that what title would be a better one. So that's I would say that this is the ongoing iteration. So until we reach kind of the map that the super majority of the people are agreeing that okay, this is a good description, this is a good title in that sense.
Okay, and are you planning to provide a concrete timeline of permitting us to suggest to provide our suggestions? I mean,
actually, the suggestions can be provided in any time. We will just have in the timeline some timestamps where we will say that now we take what it is there and we make the next version. And this timestamp for this iteration will be about mid-February, because we need to prepare for the submission of the deliverable. But we will announce the exact date. But it's not that you stop commenting or you stop adding information, is that for us, we take whatever is there until this stage. And if you see here, it says approved by. So if we go to the next version and we do some major changes, this will go that approved by VITALISE harmonization board probably on, and here it will be the date that we close the previous version. And then all the next comments will go to the next version. So that's
surely we will have kind of campaigns that if there's something that we really want to focus and collect some inputs for the certain phases, we will have kind of a campaign to stimulate people to answering on those particular things. But in general, like I say, it's open all the time.
In order to do a quick testing, I would propose for all of you to go to the co-creation sessions of the R&D services. You have the link in the chat of the wiki, you can find it, and you can try to make comments either directly on text, so annotate text and click Ctrl+M so that you can add comments, or add your comments here. So we have 5 minutes left for this session, so let's give it a quick try, and if you have any comments. And as you're doing that, I think that there was some questions on the chat. The one is it going to be open to everybody? And I think that we have answered that. The other is about these being accessible via the VITALISE web page for quick access. And Ada already replied that we will include this wiki in order to be easily accessible, but this is another independent tool, let's say. And also there was a comment that consortium need the chance to use it and integrate info in order to have a more constructive input, and of course, and that is actually your homework, let's say, for the next month or so, to go through that, to read it, and to start putting your comments there. And not only for the consortium, but for the external people that are in the harmonization body as well. So this is something we will need some of your time to go through that and make comments either for the structure or for the content itself. So please give it a try with the comments and let us know. There are already some comments. I need to refresh for others too. So. And also just a final comment. Here is the history in which you can see the changes and the versions. So as we said, this will also be in the approved by, but here you can go in previous versions to see what has been changed from one to the other. So when we make changes and we publish the new one, everyone will know what we have changed, and it will not be something that we do and no one understands why. So if there are no further comments or questions, okay, we can break for 10 minutes and come back to the same link to continue with the workshop on KPIs and Living Labs labeling. Thank you all. See you in 10 minutes. Are we back from the break? So, David, Kuhn, the floor is yours. Start whenever you want.
Go ahead, David. You sound more healthier than I do.
Okay, I will try to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Queen. So, hello everyone. The objective this afternoon is to present you the state of progress of our exchanges in this work package, and more precisely on this task, which is establishment of evaluation process and tools. So we will present you how we think to apply this task for the project based on what was initially proposed when was submitting the project, and which was a bit presented by Sylvia just before. And the idea now is to go further and to show you our discussion in the work package, and to show you as well the discussion in the workshops that we did on July 1st. And the goal of this task will allow us a continuous evaluation to have concrete results during the project. And that's why we are at the beginning and not at the end, to improve ourselves during the project and not have a result just at the end and say what we can do years after. So for this, it's necessary to define KPIs, which will be the evaluation criteria. And you will see in our presentation with Kuhn, we will discuss, we will focus on the KPIs a bit. It's a real challenge to have smart KPIs, so smart for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, that reflect the activity of the project and the structures, because it's not really easy to evaluate, for example, qualitative things. So it's, yes, we are between evaluate quantitative and qualitative criteria. Yes, so you know now this schema. Celia showed it just before, but what I was just saying before, the idea now is to be is to go a bit further during this in these 5 steps, and to develop how we think, how we will manage these different steps. As you see, the first linear path is the one performed by Timu in the task 2.1, which is analysis of Living Lab existing processes and services, and which has already started. Okay. So the evaluation process within the VITALISE project will be existing of expert evaluation of research infrastructure and living labs, and also self-assessment by the research infrastructure and living labs. We took the part of carrying out these two evaluations, internal and external, in order to have the best possible vision of the structures. So it's really a choice that we decide. Koen, if you want to comment.
It's always, it's also to match qualitative and quantitative, because if you make a self-assessment, there is a less qualitative method to collect data than doing interviews or another type of expert evaluation.
Thank you. And based also on the overall evaluation principle of the annual network, and we hope we will be pushed a little further this evaluation with the help of your feedbacks on this project. So the idea is to improve ourselves thanks to VITALISE project. Mm-hmm. And so yes, this is the points, and constructed in a flexible way. So you will see, you will be invited to work with us on this subject. And as you see, the last point, supported by KPIs to fit the self-assessment and the evaluations. So now the idea is to go to the 5 points and to develop these points and to give you an idea on the how we'll do exactly. So you in the presentation you have 2 parts. You have the initial proposal, and after our plan of action, which is the improvements of the initial proposal. And in this stage, so it's to have a clear look on what we have in front of us. So I have a mapping of all the living labs and the stakeholders. And after have this mapping, try to find KPIs. And so it's already a work in progress, because we have tools to help us, which already exists. And thanks to Enel Network, sorry, and the job that we did in the 1st of July, and also in other network. For example, in the forum, so the French network, we use another tools, and it helps us to construct all these KPIs. The second step is the study. So the main idea is after gathering the info in step 1, have a common template. But it's not so easy, and this results, if it's a clear result and used by all, it will be a real success factor of the project, because we will have a common language, and that's one of our main goals in VITALISE. And so to have a common language, we have to find common KPIs and common criteria.
Yes, and here comes your lexicon again as well at Timo, because every criteria will have to have a scoring table, and every scoring table will have to start from the same glossary or lexicon which you were mentioning earlier in your presentation, to have a common understanding about what we are talking about. Sorry, David, continue.
No, thank you for your comments. So step 3, consensus. So it was in the proposal. We know to have a common language, common lexic, and other things. It's not that easy, and maybe all the stakeholders will not be agree. So there is a step on how we manage this thing, and we to help us, we have 3 groups who can help us to have this consensus. So the harmonization board, VITALISE, Living Labs, and research infrastructures, and a third one, which not exists yet, but the idea at the end of this presentation is to have volunteers who will be interested in this subject and can work with us and to have a groups to discuss about KPIs and yes.
So the idea is not only internally in VITALISE to co-create this thing, but also validate it in the ENOL and other networks in a group, focusing on the steps which are been taken in this task, following the cycle which was explained by Celia as well. And therefore, ENOL will host a volunteer group of living labs within the health field, which are not in the VITALISE, but even beyond the health field, to see whether what we are creating makes sense to make it a sustainable plan of action.
Okay, so the first step is implement, and we can for this step, the idea is to develop a bit and so have tools to help us to do the implementation. And to do so, we'll set up evaluation structure and process for expert evaluations. We'll create a pilot group with the ENOL labeling task force. After that, we will define scoring tables criteria by criteria. And at the end, they have first draft self-assessment tool on an Excel board, for example, and it will be the first tool which can help us to evaluate ourselves. And at the end, revise and adjust. So the idea now, if there is an additional service that is not included in the list, how we'll find if there is one or how we can integrate it. So first of all, after define our first draft, the idea is to test it. After have an evaluation of it with the experts and the living labs and research infrastructures. Have an analysis of the 2 steps 8 and 9. Develop another draft and have the validation of the harmonization board. It's not working. Sorry. So what I was explained before, it's at this stage, and after the workshop of July 1st, we define chapters and criteria which were the most interest, which sorry, I don't find my word in English. we define yes, several chapters and criteria used by Living Lab and research infrastructures. And now at this stage, we try to, sorry, I'm a bit lost. Yeah, we try to match it with KPIs that we have. So the idea is not to today to have a look on each KPIs and to present you all the KPIs because we didn't finish the job yet, but it's just to give you a picture on how we proceed. And I was not clear, so maybe I will repeat myself. The workshop of July 1st was the two first columns, so chapters and criteria. And now that we are agree on these two columns, we try to find criteria, KPIs in front of these chapters.
If you go one slide back,
yes,
David. So no, sorry, the nice one with the picture which you were just showing.
So is this one or
still the next? Yeah, this one. So the chapters and the criteria on the right side were decided in the July workshop, and then the ones on the left side are the ones which are used overall within the ENOL framework when you look at the labeling and the evaluation process. And what we try to do is match the outcomes of both together with the input from Forum LLSA, which you were mentioning earlier, to see where are the synergies, how are they related to each other, and where are the black holes. That's the black chunks, which you see in the picture. So just as a clarification of what people see. You cannot read it, of course, it's way too small. But
yes, thank you, Koen. Maybe you can present that as well.
So this is just one complete overview about how we want to proceed in this task, and also following the nice harmonization methodology circle. So we are now matching the criteria, then we are going to align them, which means come to a final set of a first final set of chapters, criteria, and KPIs to be implemented. Then we will get to those three validation instruments, and then we are in the meanwhile. Actually, we are already going to set up the structure and the flow and the process and the forms for the expert evaluations and the self-assessment too, and also create that group which was mentioned earlier, where we bring together the VITALISE Living Labs and other partners in together with the labeling task force, which we already have from ENOL, of which Mr. Omer Onur is present even in this call at this stage, together with some other ENOL members or Forum LLSA members. Every Living Lab is welcome. And then we are really going together with that group define scoring tables criteria by criteria, just to make it sure that everybody interprets this criteria in a somehow similar way, and referring again to the lexicon which Temo was mentioning earlier, to make sure that if we say co-creation, this is what we mean, or when we say, I forgot your example, Temo, but that we all mean the same thing. And then we are going to loop it every 6 months in line with the harmonization board schedule to make new versions of this, of the self-assessment tool and the evaluation process overall. That's what's mentioned here. So the first question is, do you agree with this approach? Because if you don't, we need to think about another one, of course. So the floor is open for discussion now.
Thanks a lot for the many preparations. I think this is a very nice basis. And overall, of course, this slide makes a lot of sense to me in terms of the plan of action. I have a few thoughts in relation to also the sheet that Koen wanted to see, the one with the draft KPIs. Perhaps we can look again at that slide.
Can you? Yes.
Yeah, this one. So again, looking at this slide, I'm impressed by the preparations that must have gone into this. So thumbs up for that. At the same time, if I reflect about how we as TUE had formulated expectations for VITALISE, I start to realize that effectively, probably there are two different types of living labs that may want to go with completely different sets of KPIs. Perhaps the one is can use a subset of the KPIs used by the other type. And let me clarify a bit what I'm thinking of then. So I'm thinking on the one hand, we have living labs managed by the typical business incubation firms or accelerators, organizations like that. And then I think many universities have their living labs. And I think that perhaps, especially, again, speaking for myself as a partner at Eindhoven University, I think the academic living labs only need a subset of what the more business incubation-like living labs would need, especially when it comes to those that are more business related, and also about then employing all kind of support staff. These are very important, I agree, for, say, the more industrialized living labs, but I guess not so much for the university. So, and that reminded me of efforts that have been made to agree on certain standard processes, standard KPIs, and so on for project management, if you wish. So I'm thinking about efforts that were done in the capability and maturity model, and so on. And such efforts have led to standardization for organizations of different kinds, where some organizations willingly only take a subset of, let's say, the in this case KPIs, because they are small and they don't need the richer ones. So perhaps instead of aiming for one big chunk of KPIs that is then delivered to the world as in, okay, pick what you wish, perhaps a layered model can be delivered where you already indicate that, let's say, a level 1 set of KPIs is probably even useful for the smallest living lab instances that you can imagine, up to level 5, for example, or we still need to discover how many levels there would be, but that you kind of stack them. So that's an idea that I got when I saw all of this.
Well, just to clarify, within the ENOL backbone of labeling and so on, there is a 3-layered model in differences of importance of criteria and or KPIs. That at first. So this is you don't see it here, but if you go 2 slides back, I think, David, where our evaluation process is back. Yeah. So this one. As you can see, there's A criteria, B criteria, C criteria. All are important, but the one is more equal than the other. Referring to animal form of oral. No, A criteria are what you were saying, the critical minimal viable building blocks to be a living lab. That's A, the most important. Then you have B and C. So we have ordered them. We need to reevaluate them together with the next slide, David, and the one from you. Yeah, so we have matched them now. So the left side is what we already use in ENOL overall. Referring to what you were saying earlier, we can have endless discussions, but I think university living labs should fit the same 6 common building blocks as any other type of living lab, which this is in the world. You need some standardization, it's part of our thing as well. But indeed, as we mentioned on one of our first slides as well, whatever we are building here should be built in a flexible way to serve different types and different areas of work. And by different areas of work, I was mainly looking at different areas of work within the health of VITALISE, but even beyond. What works for VITALISE should work for, I don't know, an agricultural living lab in China too somehow. That's why we wanted to create that third validation group as well to see whatever, if we are saying we are harmonizing living lab methods and tools, then we should make sure that it's not only feasible for health, but based on health, because the community which we have here within VITALISE and the health and well-being community is strongly developed. So is that somewhere an answer? And then the KPIs on top of it, for me, KPIs are means to serve the evaluation process, not a goal as such.
And if I can, it's a very good point, a good question, because in France we have living labs which are integrated in hospitals and so on. And for example, they don't have a business model like other living labs in company or other ones. So I think in our approach, it's an iterative approach, and I'm sure the KPIs we will find in the first stage will be improved by the results of the first stage. And maybe, I don't know, we'll find different groups and KPIs for different groups. The best things, it will be to have common KPIs for all living labs, but I'm sure we can adapt ourselves, and the idea is to be iterative and to be the more adaptable possible.
Yeah, that is, both answers are very informative. So from Koen, indeed, it's very useful to learn about these 3 levels or so that were already planned for. So that's great to hear that. And also what then David says is, or David, that perhaps you should not think necessarily of a level 1, level 2, level 3, which is just one dimension, but perhaps you can have like a big bunch of KPIs, and then for certain organization types, you already put them in packages, let's say the hospital package, the university-like package, the incubator package, and not necessarily do they follow one linear dimension. I guess it's very useful also to think like that. Yeah.
If I can also comment on this, Peter, thanks for the feedback. On top of this, I agree, of course. Actually, what we're gonna pilot in VITALISE is that for the living labs, we're gonna have a baseline evaluation based on a full criteria on the left side, then invite them to fill in KPIs every 6 months for the next 1.5 years or 2 years, and then have again the same baseline evaluation based on the left side. And then we'll try to identify the KPIs that can predict or show how much a living lab you are. You see? So based on the baseline before and after and the changes from baseline to baseline, we'll have the KPIs. So we'll try to identify. It might be the case that for living labs that have only, simple example, okay, that have only 10 stakeholders, 10 participants, KPIs 1 to 3 can predict or can be representative. For living labs that have 20 stakeholders, then it's KPI 1 to 3 plus 4, things like this. So it's even for us an opportunity to see how we can come up with KPIs, not based on our perception, but based on the baseline evaluation before and after, and come up with, as you said, group of KPIs that could show things for the living labs.
Yeah. I could give also a comment. I put on the chat the link to the document where in Finland the universities are evaluated how well they are doing open science, and the goal in there is that we have 5 stages, like from unmanaged to strategic kind of a level. And the idea is for the government is that they are pushing universities all the time to the higher levels. And that's why in here is I would also like to see this tool in a way that we know that where we are, but the whole point of this is that pushing living labs to be more kind of, let's say, standardized and more strategic in that sense. Because like Peter was saying previously, in many cases in universities, living lab is just a side work or side job, which is integrated as a part of the the studies and the research activities and so forth. But I think that the open science evaluation model works pretty well in Finland. Of course, that the items what they are measuring are the different, but the same ideology might be good.
Yes, indeed, Tim. That's a bit the whole idea. We certainly are going to read this into depth. Thanks. And to reply to your comment in the chat, Peter, it's not about pushing up, whatever you mean by pushing up. We don't want you to become bigger than you want or whatever. But we need somehow a general approach on, because when we have the general standardized approach, you can start comparing yourself and learn by comparing as well. But you can only do so if you compare on the same principles and criteria and so on and so on.
No, fully agreed. And I wouldn't say that when I used the word pushing up, that this was suggesting that you were in fact pushing. It was rather continuing on the term that Timo had used in the Finnish approach, where indeed it may make sense, in fact, to push universities to become more open science oriented. There I agree. But the big difference is with, let's say, becoming more, let's say, mature in a way, more managed when it comes to living lab management. There again, my parallel goes to the maturity models for project management. Smaller organizations there willingly do not enforce themselves, let's say, the bureaucracy that a bigger organization needs. And I think also here, it could make sense to, of course, leverage the consortium strength in that we have many big living labs on board. And let's first indeed standardize there. But after we go through that cycle, reflect back like, okay, if the big guys need this, it's good for them, but perhaps smaller organizations, they only need a subset of the methods that were standardized. That was more the thinking that I had.
Right, thanks. And reflecting on Broer's comment on the common KPIs for the sharing, for the starting point of shared value creation, yeah, that's why the biggest chunk on the left, value, the orange one, that's value. And that's the highest part which we use in the anal network, and which was luckily for us also identified in the workshop in July as being pretty important. So we indeed, a living lab should be about co-created values for every involved stakeholder. Any other comments, thoughts, remarks, shooting us down? Please feel free.
Just a quick comment in here. I was just thinking about that, because anyway, living labs are always operating through the projects. So you will have the projects, and if we have like the standardized ways of doing or describing the projects like research protocols. So basically, we could inherit the information for these KPIs from those research protocols in a way, like for example, how the users are engaged and where they engage which part of them and so forth. So that is, in theory at least, is impossible if there would be like a common way of describing your research protocol. And that's just summing up whatever you have been done, and then some technically summing up for that.
Doesn't work when you're muted. Yes, that's correct, Tim. And also what you were presenting with your living lab management system, this is to be taken into account as well. So, all right. Anything else? And sorry for my Rudolph nosy sound today.
Okay, maybe for the next step, I don't know how you want to proceed, Koen, to recruit to have
Oh, well, let's open the invitation to everyone in this call. If you feel like joining that particular group on defining and further aligning everything which has been done into a tangible approach, and then test it, or at any stage you don't have the time to say, okay, I can work together with you on this, but hey, look, if you want to test something at a certain stage, just get to my Living Lab or Array or something. Please be invited to send emails to me and David, and then we will set this up together with the already existing labeling task force of ENOL, of course, because we will take the experience from you, David, from the formal LSA, together with the label task force from ENOL to move this thing forward. But everybody is very much welcome to join this group. And if you apply to become part, we can align on how we proceed within that group. All right. I think I just earned you all an additional coffee. Thanks for the magnificent feedback. But Despina, it's your show, so I'll give it back to you.
So if there are no further comments for this part, I think that we have time to break for another 10 minutes to grab some more coffee. But I think it was a very fruitful discussion and comments. So please feel free to follow up with Kun and David as needed. If we all agree, we can break now for 10 minutes and come back at 4 for the closing session on ICT tools. Okay, good. So see you all in 10 minutes. Hello, are we back? Perfect. I know that we are all starting to get tired, but we hope that we will have a last interactive session and close this fruitful meeting with success. So this last hour of our meeting will be about the ICT tools that VITALISE is creating in order to offer to the living labs and to external researchers for facilitating their work. And we will have two smaller sessions in this. The one will be about the requirements of that regard to data sharing across living labs and across researchers. And the other will be about the panel management. So first, I will give the floor to my colleague from ALF, Alexandra, to present you the data sharing approach that we are using. Alexandra, are you there?
I see her in the list at least.
Yes, me too. I don't know. She said that her microphone is not responding. So we'll try to re-enter.
Hello, can all of you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, I had some issues. Let me find a way to share my screen. Okay, actually, it's not necessary to share the screen. So, hi, hello all. I'm Alexandra from AUF.
Alexandra, we cannot see your screen. I don't know if you're sharing anything.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Perfect. So for now, we are planning on circulating a questionnaire regarding how researchers respond to data sharing and utilizing data that is openly shared by other researchers. We are planning on circulating this particular questionnaire. This is the first version of what we are envisioning. And it's mostly focusing on the demographics, the researchers that we are hoping that will be shared through the consortium. Data sharing experiences to gauge a little bit of what has already been done. And then we are mostly focusing on the attitude, what we believe the benefits will be, what concerns we have about sharing, mainly focusing on legal restrictions, financial restrictions, this feeling of mistrust that is usually does not come from a tangible evidence, but just from behavior and social issues. And then what would actually be the motivation, further motivate researchers in order to share their data. This is quite frankly for me, one of the most important sections of the questionnaire, because it can actually provide requirements and give us feedback in order to be able to satisfy some of these concerns and maybe actually create a system. Evokimos actually gave a very good idea about having a point system regarding publications that we can utilize in order to motivate researchers to openly share their data with less fear. We are going to make we are going to make some changes to this document, but we are planning on sharing this as soon as possible with researchers, and it would be very good if you could circulate it also outside the consortium to have a better idea of how researchers respond to such questions. Thank you.
I have a question regarding this topic. Is this questionnaire aiming for only data sharing or also on research data processing?
This is mainly focused on data sharing. We have not touched upon the subject of online data processing, but if you would feel like this is a subject that should be touched upon, please send suggestions. Please, if it's possible, send an article based on that so we can add this feature.
Okay, I mean, what I see is that within the ICT tools, at least from Work Package 3 point of view, the main tools will be one that I think is the next point of discussion, which is panel management, and the other one is the research use of data that might be available or made available in a controlled way within Living Labs. So one thing is to ask the consortium and to ask the community about being or what's their attitude towards sharing data and sharing data within those areas. And the second thing is, I think, rather on what would be their goals when they have some data available for research. What I mean, from Work Package 3, we're missing a bit of input regarding on what I usually call on the research data use case, on what type of queries a researcher would be willing to do. That's I mean, imagine that we make available through harmonized or a VITALISE data model certain data sets on, I don't know, on standardized evaluation tools, or on sensor data, that the example of heart rate or stuff, and what type of I mean, if you would be made available of this type of data, what type of searches would you make to find more finer data on what you're looking for? I don't know. I would look on different Living Labs for okay, I want to look for heart rate, but not how many entries are in for heart rate in general. I want to see for certain users which are aged above I don't know how much, or for certain gender, or that they might have certain properties that these people might have. At least that's my point of view. I'm not sure if this is the goal of this questionnaire.
No, actually, the scope of this questionnaire is to gauge the behavior and the attitude of the researchers towards sharing. What you're talking about is a bit more specific to the use of the depository after the sharing has been done. So that is the next step, or at least that is how I see it. But yes, it is very important to see when you start using the depository, how you want your searches to be formulated and what type of data you prefer to use. Any other questions, possibly? Anything you want to add to this?
Alexander, now that you were discussing, I was thinking that we may share this questionnaire as well with the consortium if they have some comments. But they will answer as well as a testing case, right?
Yes, that is correct. We are planning on sharing them for them to fill it in, but if you want to have their input during the development stage, that is also possible, because we will have a more round idea of what should be included and what should be excluded. But so, should I share it openly? It's already in Teams, so everybody can find it, but
I don't know, just an idea, because I see that some people are interested, so but I don't know, then can we include it then also in the people that answer, if they contribute, you know, to the creation?
That is also an issue, because if they participate in the creation of the questionnaire, I'm not sure that they are unbiased.
Yeah,
answers that they will provide.
Okay, so maybe we share only with the technical partners, yes, Gorka or anyone else interested on reviewing this.
If anybody is interested in participating in the reviewing of this document, of this questionnaire, please inform me so I can send it to you and formulate a plan for the next steps.
Perfect, thank you. So let's move on to the other ICT tool, which is the panel management. So, Despina?
Hi all.
The other Despina of the team who will start.
Let me share my screen. Actually, with Despina, we have prepared some slides, but a very, very quick presentation, because actually we would like to have an exercise together. Can you see my screen?
We see it in a
okay.
presentation mode.
Now?
Now it's fine.
Great. So we all know, while we're all working with people, that for living labs and for our research, people are an invaluable resource, as they are in the core of our activities, and for living labs means a lot. However, it's not always to identify the right groups of people and to manage the different stakeholders groups that we need to engage every time in our activities. So for these reasons, we are referring to the management of these groups of people as panel management. And panel management includes tools and different methods and strategies on how to approach the right people for the right activities, and how to keep them engaged, and how to keep track of their activity and all the information you need to know about them. It's not an easy task, as sometimes the wider a panel is, the most difficult for researchers or living labs to manage them. It's a task that requires time and human resources most of the times, in order to manage different amounts of people, collect different types of information, sometimes sensitive information about them, and all these things, these things are quite time-consuming sometimes, and maybe confusing when we have to run a research or an activity as fast as possible. Starting from a pain that we identified in our living lab in Thessa Hall. As you know, we primarily work with chronic patients, older adults, and other vulnerable groups. And from year to year, we have established a wide network of such stakeholders, as well as of professionals, formal and informal caregivers, other researchers. And now, thankfully, we have a great pool of different types of stakeholders, but we started realizing that it's really hard to follow, to keep track of these people and to keep them engaged if we use traditional means as in previous years, like Excel files, printed lists, handwritten lists. And this is not, of course, either neither safe in terms of data protection, but nor effective, as we realized in some cases, to give an example, that as we are too many researchers in the living labs and 10 different research groups, in some cases, we called people to participate in some activities that other people from the lab also called them, even though in some cases they were unavailable due to health issues, and that was really annoying sometimes, and also weird even for us, who called the same people again and again. So for this reason, VITALISE gave us the ground in order to start thinking of building something more concrete as a tool, something that will fit to our needs and our research, to solve our challenges, and also to help other researchers outside the consortium in the future to address their own challenges in panel management. And now it's time to exercise together. So Despina, I will give the floor to you. I will share the screen, the mirror screen with all of you, and we will also share the link in the chat.
I have already shared the link, so you will see the board now. It's a very simple board, just to start the discussion. Despina, will you share? Perfect. So let's join the mirror board and start with the left or right, I don't know, in any case, with the first list. We have two, let's say, use cases to explore, and for each one we want you to start thinking how you're doing that now, what are the challenges that you're facing now, and what a possible solution might be for that. And the cases are very well linked to what a panel management tool is doing. Despina, maybe you can move it a bit to see. Okay, yes. So please start joining this board, this mirror board. And the case is that you are a living lab researcher, of course, And imagine that you have a new project and you need to recruit participants that are not already in your panel, that are of a new, let's say, population group. Let's say that you have not worked before with healthy older adults, so you need to find some new people to join. And you start making some contacts with the organizations that you have. You talk with people and you find that some are interested to join the project and also join the upcoming events. What are you currently doing to collect information for these people, to store information for these people? Which information do you need? Okay.
Despina, we all need to request access to get
Yes,
onto the Miro board.
I will make it public now, Despina, okay?
Sorry, Despina, yeah.
Think that
If you want us to type, you need to say anyone with a link can edit.
yes, but can you see it's not?
Yes, it works.
I know it works.
But
it works.
Has entered. Kun, you are in.
Yes.
Okay, now it works.
Thank you.
As you are typing, please also feel free to unmute yourselves and also describe and share with other people your experience of how you are doing things right now.
You can also share your thoughts and we can handle the post-its for you. Giving an example and starting from our own experiences, as we saw in the presentation, what we used to use so far are primarily written lists, either in hand or printed lists, Excel files or Word documents. That was our traditional way to keep records of our participants and identify from the list every time those who fit to our to our cases, to our activities. So what about you?
Yes, perhaps I can add something from LikaLab. So what we do is, so all the lists are very recognizable as well. But we also use MailChimp, and we put our contacts into MailChimp and tag them as well.
So you use MailChimp as an address book?
Yes, and we give our panel members tags so that we can filter a bit on that.
And this allows you to enter only email addresses or other?
Yes, email, but also gender, age, some additional information. But MailChimp is a good tool for communication. But yeah, that's just one part of panel management. So we miss a lot of yeah, really the management, the monitoring of our activities. That's a challenge.
Yeah, what you're suffering, Lane, is that some panel members are participating or subscribing to certain activities, not showing, well showing, yes or no. Maybe you collect some information, qualitative information like documents or stuff like this. And what you need is a system which can link all these different types of information, communication, activities, feedback, in a tech-like system where it's working on a unique ID of the panel member as such.
Yeah, right.
As you are aware, we have been developing this quite a long time. And the tricky thing is in a living lab, and when you do panel management, that there are so many different type of tags, if you want to call it tags, that you need to build a system which is flexible enough to categorize those tags into communication, activities, all this kind of stuff. On the one hand, and on the other hand, to make it dynamically enough so that you can add or remove parts of those tags without losing your overall framework.
Yeah, and it should be a system that's also is smart.
Yeah, indeed. So using MailChimp is already a good thing, because they will keep track of the one unsubscribing, for instance, because if you work with Excels, this will kill you.
Yeah.
And this relates to the comment of Lucy also. Yes, DTA or data transfer agreements. You need an agreement with each of individual panel members. So you make a user agreement or something like this. I guess you have it in Likalab.
Yes, yeah, we work with informed consent.
Yeah. But that means that people that you should be able to indicate in your system, is this still up to date? Because if you change something to your general conditions and then everybody needs to agree to it again, or and so on and so on. And this is something completely different type of tech, as did he or she receive the email, respond to it, or whatever. No, I'm not giving examples, Despina. I'm giving lessons learned from my IMIC period, which we failed massively with a group of 27,000 people. And the moment your panel gets bigger, and I think Tessa Hall is facing this as well on the meanwhile, you too, Lane, when your panel grows, which we all want, beyond the capacity of one human brain, if I can call it like this, if not Lane Brooks knows any panel member by name, place, and stuff anymore, then you need to think about data sustainability, in which members can update their contact details, for instance, themselves.
Exactly. And of course, we all very happy when we have people to work with, when people would like to participate in our research and our activities in our living labs. And we're very happy every time a new member comes to us for joining the group. However, as you said, Koen, it's really hard for one or even for a group of people to remember everything, and especially when at the same time we run parallel activities, different projects with different needs for recruitment, different things to monitor. And more or less, from your answers, we all use similar approaches on reaching our people. However, some of them are more occasional, I would say. So when we buy some profiles, okay, of course, we try to identify some specific characteristics that our participants would like to have, or through snowballing, from mouth to mouth. Also, we try to recruit people with similar inclusion criteria. However, how we will keep from after this stage, how we will keep monitoring their activities and willingness to join, to come again and again. For example, the problem that we face usually, as we work with older adults, their health is quite unstable. And in some periods, although they are willing to join, they can due to health problems. They set their unavailability to us. We try to keep this information somewhere in the traditional lists so as not to call them again and again for this time period. But it's not always easy.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I would like to ask actually, Lynn, what they are doing. For example, if you're conducting in any other means, not email, that is tracked by MailChimp. So if you're contacting someone by phone or by, I don't know, face-to-face meeting, do you track that somehow? Or this information is lost?
Yes, no. We track it in the list, separate from the MailChimp, because there's no email address. We try to keep them informed, but not. Yeah, we have our monthly newsletter, and that's digital, so that's every month. But people who don't have email address, so they don't hear from us on a regular basis. So, but we try to do, once a year. We send also like a Christmas card with, and we send it to that post address. Yeah. And then we put in also an agenda of our upcoming activities so that we try to keep them engaged in some way, but not that regular as through our newsletter.
But it's also the other way around. We have also a lot of project and use cases where we recruit participants for, and they can also be recruited with flyers, with posters, offices of GPs and so on, with communication channels of the local authorities. We also use those communication channels. And whenever those citizens or those patients, etc., want to work on the project with us, we also ask them if they would like to be part of the LICA Lab panel. So it also works that way around, and then they can be added to the official panel member list after they give their consent. But then still we have to see which upcoming projects are still of interest for them. And so that's always something to take care of and to be attentive to. So, yeah.
Of course, and panel management tool is a process that will not erase the traditional methods that we all use, flyers, and mouth-by-mouth recruitment, etc. But it is a complementary tool, not actually for the first steps of the recruitment, but for maintaining our panel active and engaged. So as there are some comments here, there are different challenges that we all face while we try to run an activity, a research. Much time is needed for handling all these communications with participants. Sometimes participants, as someone wrote here, and if they would like to comment more, sometimes participants confirm late, and there are several logistic issues that should be addressed in time, especially when you organize an event or a co-creation. Would you like to comment a little bit more on this?
Koen has also raised hand. So.
Yeah, I was raising my hand to a previous thing, but I can respond to this. you communicate one-to-many via one-to-many channels. And if it's coming down to pure practical things like, do you know where you need to be, and are you not forgetting? Certainly when you're working with elderly people, they might be more forgetting than others. Then you pick up the phone and call them, or send them a text or WhatsApp or whatever. The more individual, the more direct your communications channels needs to be. I was reflecting to what you were saying earlier on characteristics of panel members. What I hear now, you have two different layers. A panel member is a member of your panel, and a panel member can be part of multiple projects consecutively or at the same time. It's up to you as an organization to decide. However, your system, and this will never work in Excel, unfortunately, will need to have a protection mechanism to prevent people for being contacted in a certain period, because they are already highly involved in a project, or like you were mentioning, they have had surgery and for the time being they are not available, stuff like this. When you are talking about the general profile of a panel member, you should talk about it at the beyond project level. If you invite people and you want to create a snowballing mechanism possible of you can join anytime, you need to decide for yourself on a very basic profile and which are the parts of that basic profile. Lane was mentioning earlier, probably as gender, age, I don't know, physical condition, maybe in the Lika Lab case, I don't know. And this is what is collected of everyone. Even when, Despina, when you bring your boyfriend to a co-creation, he should fill in that same standard profile, otherwise you will never be able to work. So, and when you talk about communications, you should think about communities of interest, which is your panel, which you reach out to via newsletters, social media, whatever, and your community of practice in a project or in a certain activity. And the more you go to the community of practice perspective, the more you need to change your ways of communication, and the more you need to do it one-on-one. That's my experience.
Thank you, Koen. We fully agree. Actually, according to our experiences and previous lessons learned, and if we, how would you foresee such kind of a panel management tool, a digital tool, a tracker of people, activities, or any other kind of information that you believe that it would be helpful for running your research easier, more effectively, faster in terms of recruitment and organizing events?
Yeah, ideally, in an ideal world, as for me, I would like to have like a general database, an overall panel database, and with sub projects where I can monitor each project, and that and monitor. That means that that I can see who was attending the co-creation, real life testing, but also that you could attach like the informed consent or other forms. That you can also save it within that database, and that's a different feature. Also, communication and recruitment. That you can send out an invitation, that you can send out a link to a survey. So, yeah, that's a lot.
Especially, Lynn, you mentioned something very important. Consent forms, which is also another thing that we need to keep tracks and printed materials and huge amounts of papers, which is also something that sometimes when you run for many years different activities with different people, this is also something chaotic. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else before going to the second part of the exercise?
one general comment, sorry, yeah, for keeping interview. Any panel management tool to be developed should serve two purposes, I think. As if you want to be servicing panel managers, it should be on the one hand tracking what's been done by whom, for when, and how many, and so on, but querying as well, because next project comes in and they say, okay, we need 70, 60-year-old ladies playing tennis every Sunday. I'm exaggerating here now, but then you need to be able to go into your database, like you are mentioning, calling it, Lane, and see how many do we have already and how many do we have available, because by that, you know how many you will have to still recruit to get to your point. So it should be servicing two things, actually.
We fully agree, not only to monitor current activities, but also to be able from the tool to design your future activities. Engaging the right people for the right everything, every time projects or events.
Yeah, and actually, if you have a business developer in your team, he or she could check the tool when he is talking to a client to say, okay, yeah, we're looking really forward to work with you, but it cannot happen now because our panel is occupied or whatever. So it can serve not only panel managers. And concerning the paper consent forms, you should stop doing paper consent forms. Even when you work with elderly people, just buy 10 laptops, 10 iPads, and we'll explain to them and let them actively consent on your form that it's into your tool.
Yes, actually, this is our aim for the next year.
If you have to do it retrospective, you will have to make it possible to attach screenshots to people in your tool, because then you can scan your paper written consent forms.
Thank you, Koen. Very, very important, all of your remarks, and thank you all. I think that, Vestina, we should move to the second half of the exercise. Would you like to make us a short introduction again?
I can, yes. It's actually a continuation of the discussion that is going on, because we were a bit focusing on the recruitment part and how we store the initial information and how we communicate for the first time, let's say. So imagine that we have this database ready, we have all the profiles ready, but now we need to go to organize an event. And we need to invite our stakeholders to join. And as we said, we were also talking about older adults. So again, it can be sending an email, but what other tools you use when you want to organize an event? What you're using now? What are the challenges that you're facing? And what are the solutions? So it's more or less the same things that we were discussing, but moving forward on an event level. And if other living labs want to share their views also of what they are doing right now, how they store information, how do they store communication profiles, all the communications that are done, the events that they are doing.
To give an example, maybe from our lessons learned, regardless of the means of communication that we might use, we have identified that every person is different. People have different preferences on how to communicate them. So some people ask to call them on the phone. Some others who are more digitally literate ask for emails or SMS, or different days and day slots that we can communicate with them because of other obligations. And this is a real challenge when you have to work with many people and you cannot always remember who prefers what.
And I will grab what Kunis was writing, that you go where they are and invite them personally. But then the next time, will you go there again? And do you know that you will find them? And let's say that they trust you. How will you know that this people is joining again and again? If we're not talking about 10 people, of course, we are talking about hundreds.
To a certain activity, you mean?
Yeah, I mean that I found these challenges in this approach.
Yeah, so
ideas.
I try to link it. So when you go where they are to invite them personally, the challenge is that they don't trust you because they don't know you. And the solution might be to make use of intermediaries. I mean, let me give a concrete example. When you need 30 people of a nursery home, and you go to the nursery home and you bring cake and coffee to convince them to participate, they still might not, unless you use the nurse of the hallway to convince them. That's what I mean with an intermediary. For instance, how do you know that they will participate again? Lane, I'll let you answer that one, but the answer is you don't. Despite whatever you do, you can only increase the amount by providing value to them.
Mm-hmm. Not only a matter of incentives or motivation for participation, but trust, as Despina mentions, in some cases we have faced, but of course this is an exemption. Some people prefer to talk with some specific researchers from the lab. This does not mean that they become rude when we call them on the phone, but they are more willing when a person who knows them for many years calls them. So this is also a trick that we use in order to have effective recruitment. But this is also, again, a challenge, because it's really hard to remember every time that, okay, Mrs. Maria prefers to talk with Despina Pecan, but not with Despina Manzgeri.
Okay. So, and how big is your team then, Despina? Because in our case, and it's Koen who taught us at the beginning that as a panel manager, you are the face of your living lab. So, and I have a colleague, so we're the two faces of Lika Lab. And it doesn't matter if I call or my colleague calls the participant, because they know us both.
In most of the cases, as in the activities, people who participate for over 5 years and more, some of them almost a decade in different research activities, they come again and again. They have met and collaborated already with different researchers, and this is something that we try to promote through the Living Lab, so as to feel familiar both with Despina, with Evdokimos, with me, with other colleagues, and not to have this person-centered approach. However, when we need to invite some 50 participants, it's really time-consuming, only 1 or 2 persons to take all these phone calls and make all these confirmations. So we split the team of older adults or other stakeholders in smaller groups, and we made some phone calls. And every time we try to rotate, so as not people to listen always the same voices. I fully understand your approach, but we try to build trust in another way.
You build trust by content, not by person.
By, excuse me?
Content, not by person.
Yeah.
By what you are doing, not by who you are doing it.
The lab and the many years of working with them, and their positive experiences from working with the lab are on the forefront.
However,
what you can
I would suggest you to create multiple SPOCs then. The SPOC lane, you have two, apparently, for the whole of LicaLab, and all involved stakeholders are coming to you and your colleague, Sasha, no? So when you have multiple stakeholders, you could decide on, okay, every academia-related person will go to Despina Mansira, every elderly woman will go to F documents, and every older man will go to Despina Pizzani. It's stuff like this, because then you can still make it tangible for you as a team to operate what you need to do, because if you really need to call 100 people, it takes indeed some time because they don't directly pick up, but the trust relation will remain within a subgroup. Just thinking out loud here.
Personally, just sharing my personal thoughts now, I don't disagree with you, but when we had the panel, even with the traditional lists, as such, split in groups and people, we faced this problem. For example, Despina had a very, very close collaboration with Parkinson's Association. They, because she always communicates with them, and she has worked with them for several different activities, and me not. But we have a new project in the lab that Evdokimos and me are working more on this. So we need to recruit people from Parkinson's Association. If we don't have Despina, we are dependent on Despina. And if she is not available because she is sick or on leave, or she doesn't have time to make them fall, it's like Evdokimos and me be hanging from someone else. With our approach, by putting the Living Lab on the forefront and telling that we are from FESHAL, we are calling on behalf of Professor Bamidis, it's like signing the trust that we all have built with these people all these years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this can perfectly work, I think.
Different approaches, you know.
I would like to add two more questions to this very informative discussion for the last 5 minutes that remain. One is, how do you foresee what information, let's say, you would like to have in a digital tool on the event or project level? Because we discussed about the profiles a bit, but on the events and project level, what information would you like to handle as a manager? And on the other hand, I would like to ask people on their opinion on who is controlling, let's say, this interface, this tool. Is it only the panel manager? Is it the Living Lab manager? Is all the researchers of the Living Lab? So how do you see that?
So if I can give my thoughts on that. So I think it's important that for every activity that we really have a list of who did accept the invitation and who came, and what about the dropouts. I think that's priority. And your second question, Despina, of who has the right to edit and to work within the database. I think from privacy perspective, for me, I think it's most valuable for the panel managers.
So would you like maybe the researchers to have lower level, let's say, the researchers in the hierarchy, to have access to some data in order to be able to at least do the calls? I don't know, something like that. But you are responsible for making all the changes. Just ideas. And
yeah, I don't have a clear answer to that. I have to think about it.
Just a quick comment from me. So I think there's because, for example, our university, we don't have any centralized panel management. It's basically always on the project basis. And then, each of the project is handling the recruitment as they do. And depending on the project, it's a bigger project, there might be a person who is kind of giving a task to do that, because that's typically a task that nobody wants to do in a way. And if you can deliver that to somebody else, then it's always a favor. So I think whenever is the tool is have to be thinking about it should be working at the, let's say, a university level as a combination of things, but also it should be working at the individual project level. Just to kind of my comment in here.
If I may add to the discussion, as far as the Canadian Living Labs are concerned, we have very specific and rather rigid rules about how data are preserved, who has access to the data. All of this is mentioned in the consent form, how long we preserve the data, and so we essentially follow all of these rules. Earlier, you were talking about contacting participants for multiple projects. Even that needs to be specified in our consent form. That is, we get their okay. Can we contact you for another project? So yeah, essentially, the rules specified by the ethics board, whether it's hospital ethics board or McGill, we need to go, our living labs need to go through hospital ethics boards, precisely because we're linked to the rehab centers. And we have to follow very, very carefully and very strictly all of these rules.
I fully agree with you, Eva. You create consent forms for a reason. You should create a consent form for your overall panel. If you want to involve them in multiple projects, you should mention it from the start. If it's only project-based, like Timo was mentioning, then you need to sign a consent form for every project again and again and again, and it takes a lot of overhead. So you recruit people to your panel, providing them with the possibility to contribute in many different things. I think that's the way that you do it in Likalab. Concerning who has access to what, on a need-to-know base, that's the general message. Persons in your organization and outside your organization know information about your panel members on a need-to-know base. Let me explain it. The panel manager is the one and the only one who knows everything about panel members, in theory. Who is it? Is it David Servet, Evdokimos, Eva Kayala? Where does she live? What is his phone number? And so on and so on. And all other roles in your organization should have on a need-to-know base. If a researcher needs to know that it is Lane, Evdokimos, Peter, and Eva participating in an activity, yes, then you should share that particular knowledge with the researcher, but the BizDev doesn't need to know. Or the Living Lab manager doesn't need to know, because you need to protect the privacy, and Eva was mentioning it. And the more health-clinical you get, the more important this is to keep this very, very separated. So the way that we started constructing a panel management tool back in 2006 was, this is for 2 persons only, the panel managers, and the rest can have access to anonymous data of profiles which are present, but not able to link it to persons. So there's only panel managers and IMEC. We had 6 panel managers in the end, and it was only them contacting panel members, not anyone else, before or prior to a project. Once you are invited to a project and you have consent to a project, first step that you do to create that trust, which you were mentioning, Despina Monsari, you introduce who's involved. If Documos, Despina, I don't know, Antonis, Panos, whatever. Those people have those roles and they will do this with your data and you will see them doing this. And there you create the trust in a project. And the moment that you start communicating in a project, just add pictures of everyone involved in the bottom. That's what we did for a long time.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do too. Yeah. Okay.
So when we send an email concerning OLLD, very bad example, then it will say Martina, Koen, and the whole DLLD team, and we will add photos if necessary for everyone, for instance, and we will keep that up in every channel of communication which we use, because if you create a leaflet, the pictures needs to be on the leaflet as well. If you create a paper invitation, it needs to be there as well. It needs to be consistent in the long run. That's the main message, actually.
And if someone changes or leaves, or
and you just announce in your next newsletter, by the way, now Despina has left us because she bought a little girl. She won't be with us for 2 years, but we have splendid Antonis now. And you introduce Antonis.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to, I don't know about that, but if I am the panel manager and I'm the only person that have access to all of this and I leave the organization, do you need to redo consent?
No.
Forms? No.
No. People sign consents with your organization, not with persons.
Yeah, so the panel database is managed by Thomas More, and Lane works for Thomas More as well as Sasha, so it's okay. We don't have an other specific agreement with Lane and Sasha because they work at the premises and they are staff. So yeah.
So, okay,
so in theory, Despina, coming back to Out, if they sign an agreement with Out at Thessaloniki Aristoteles University, in theory, your researchers can do it the same because they're from the same legal entity. However, it's still my strong recommendation to set up a structure on a need-to-know base on data. Exactly. Legally, there's no point, but ethically.
That is why I was going back to the tool. So maybe the tool need to have these roles, and you can, as a panel management, assign and take back the roles on a need-to-know basis, maybe per event or per project. So if I am the panel manager and I need someone to call all the people to help me, let's say, because I cannot manage it all by myself, I can give the access, but then I can take it back, right? That is why what we would like to have, or not.
Yeah. I would not. I would do that differently. But okay.
Yeah, because at LICALab we have many project managers, and I don't think it's necessary that they really look into our panel management database. Lane and Sasha are doing that, and of course, if you have a new panel manager, then he or she can also do that.